I think that it's time to introduce the team. So I am Cecile, Head of Marketing at ShiftCare, and I'm also joined by Andrew, Customer Success Manager, who
Hi,
most
everyone.
of you might know and have had the pleasure to be working with. But today is not about us at all. This is about Amanda Watson, who is joining us and is going to be hosting this webinar. So Amanda Watson is the founder of Audit Hub. And Audit Hub is a company that helps aged care and disability support provider for all around compliance support throughout their entire journey. This is also quite exciting for us because this is the official launch of our expert webinar series. So stay tuned in the coming weeks to find out which other webinars we're going to be creating just for you guys. The presentation is going to be 30 minutes long, and then as I mentioned at the end of it, Amanda and maybe Andrew, if there are some questions related to ShiftCare, will be able to jump in and answer all your questions. So please do not use the chat, use the Q&A button that is located at the bottom of the screen. That's it for me. I'm just going to go on mute and then I'll let Amanda run the show.
Thank you so much, Cecile. And as luck may just have it, we've just got the gardener who's just appeared to do some whippersnipping. So I'll be texting to the side to try to do what I can to prevent that and stop that noise coming through. So hello, everybody. I am so thrilled to be a part of this webinar today. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm beaming live to you from, the Darug people. I am really excited to be working with ShiftCare. This is a long time coming. I have experienced ShiftCare as a user in my role as a support worker in providing in-home support in aged care and disability. And I've also experienced ShiftCare as a user, as a compliance manager as well. And as the founder of Audit Hub and working closely with aged care providers and disability over a number of years now, I am very, very happy when I can introduce them to the ShiftCare platform. I really do see that it is a wonderful, intuitive platform and provides a lot of wonderful features to support operations and compliance. So thanks very much for joining today. I'll just go through a little bit of a background as to Audit Hub. I am an NDIS lead auditor. I have been working in compliance now for close to 10 years, and I've been working in a number of industry sectors. But as I just mentioned, I do have direct experience in disability and aged care, and this is very close to my heart. We at Audit Hub all have this direct experience, and we're really passionate about providing support to providers, removing complexity around your compliance requirements, supporting you with great personal knowledge, building your knowledge through training, and really working with you to design practical systems that are going to support you to keep your attention to where it needs to be and direct and provide those wonderful quality services that you've started your business to be able to provide. So the webinar today is really about removing complexity around this audit process. We are going to be working together, even through your Q&A session. You'll be contributing to build the knowledge around your experiences in the audit, asking those questions. We'll be deep diving into the process areas and the modules of the NDIS practice standards, and really getting an understanding of what is expected of you at that time of that audit. What is the auditor expecting to see? And then finally, I'm going to provide you with a really practical process and a system that's going to support you to undertake an internal audit. And that is it's a compliance requirement, as you know, but it really is the most efficient way for you to review your as-is processes and systems and to develop a corrective action plan that you'll be able to implement to get you ready for that audit. So before we jump in, I just want to acknowledge that a lot of you attending today would be attending with a little bit of a sense of fear and dread. The word audit can elicit a little bit of concern depending on what your experiences have been with audits. I want to try to challenge that. The audit is, of course, a compliance activity, The intent is, of course, to verify that your systems are being implemented fully to meet the requirements of the NDIS practice standards. But this actual process itself gives you an opportunity to direct some time and some resources to review your as-is processes and systems. This is an opportunity to identify what is working really well for you, where some gaps may be, and what you need to correct to ensure that you have those robust processes and systems in place to give you assurance that you're compliant. So I understand the fear here, but again, this audit process is a fact about supporting you to continually improve your processes and your systems. So as I just mentioned, the audit is, of course, a compliance activity. It is a formal activity, no doubt, okay? The intent is for an auditor who is objective to come in and review the way that you do things and ensure that those processes and systems and the people that you have operating in the business are meeting those expectations of the NDIS practice standards, are meeting the expectations of our community, and of course, meeting the expectations and needs of your participants. So every audit, no matter what kind of audit that you are undertaking, whether it be a provisional audit for those providers who are very early on in their journey and have not commenced service delivery, or whether you are actually about to undertake a certification audit, that is that audit that's conducted in 2 stages, where the auditor will be able to talk with participants and verify implementation of your system. Or for some providers who are a little bit further along in their journey, you might be undertaking a midterm audit, which has been scheduled to occur 18 months after that initial audit was done and focuses on just one element of the standard, one division of the standard. So wherever you are in what kind of audit you are required to undertake, the audit journey is the same. The audit goes through a planning phase and then the audit is actually conducted. A report is developed by the auditor which communicates the outcomes and the recommendations. It provides the evidence to support those recommendations and outcomes. And then that report is presented and delivered to the NDIS Commission for them to ultimately review and have that assurance that yes, they agree with the auditor and they take on their recommendation that you can be a certified or a registered provider, maintain certification. So the key thing here is that the auditor is not the decision maker. The auditor's job is to collect evidence, and the evidence that they can collect is totally dependent on what you can show them, okay? So let's talk about the first phase, and that is the planning phase. So you will have contact with an approved quality auditor. They are the businesses that coordinate the audit. They will be allocating your lead auditor. I would recommend that early on in the conversation with those approved quality auditors, where you are giving them information about your business, about the structure of your business, and the kinds of services that you are and you want to provide, that you start to flag if you are considering changing anything. So the audit is a wonderful opportunity to make some variations to your business registration details and also to the scope of your services. You can add or remove registration groups at this phase, but please bring that to the attention in this planning phases early on, because there are implications for auditing requirements. If, for example, you are registering and expanding your scope to include high intensity daily activities, then you will be required to provide evidence against an additional module. Now that will need to be accounted for in terms of the time and the auditor that's going to be allocated, which of course may be impacting on will impact on the cost of the audit. The earlier on you can flag it, the better. You don't have to have all of the answers during that planning stage, but don't leave anything to the actual audit day and have a surprise. So after you've had that, the conversations with the approved quality auditor, the business, they will allocate an auditor. The auditor will get in contact with you generally about 3 weeks before the audit. And again, this is another opportunity to run through your details, run through the kind of businesses that you're operating, where you're operating from, the number of your participants, the number of your outlets, and also what kind of registration groups that you think are going to be applicable to you. Stay the same, or you want to make a change. The auditor will then develop an audit plan and they send it through to you. You should be confirming receipt of that and acknowledging that everything is okay to go and confirm. And then the audit day actually occurs. Now, I want to just talk to you what you might start to see in terms of language and the structure of the audit day itself. This will be presented in the audit plan. For the majority of you today, with the registration groups that you are registered under and the services you provide, you will be required to meet the requirements of the NDIS Practice Standard Core module. And as I mentioned, there may be some additional modules that you'll need to provide evidence against, depending on those registration groups, including, for example, Module 1, which is high intensity daily activities, or Module 2A, if you are an implementing provider of positive behaviour support plans, which may include a restrictive practice. For the webinar today, we're obviously quite short with time. I'm going to be focusing on the core module because that is definitely what you are all uniformly going to be having to provide evidence against. So the NDIS Practice Standards core module is divided into 4 parts. The first part is rights and responsibilities. The second part is governance. The third, service provision. And fourth, safe service environment. So for the audit plan, the auditor will need to allocate time and an auditor to effectively review the systems that support these areas. So that is what you're going to start to see in the audit plan. You'll see, for example, the auditor will schedule a session for governance in the morning, directly after an opening meeting. They'll be wanting to talk to key personnel, and they'll be scheduling some time, a great bulk of the time, to service provision and breaking up some of those activities in that particular area. So the plan definitely does align to the NDIS practice standards, again, to ensure that there is time allocated to verify the systems supporting these respective areas. So once you've received the plan, and of course you can go back to the auditor when they're preparing this plan, use this time to clarify exactly what is expected. But once the opening meeting starts, again, this is another chance to run through that audit plan. So the opening meeting should be attended by key personnel, and it should be attended by key process owners. And that is the people who you think are going to be participating in this audit, speaking directly to the auditor, I should say. So get them to the opening meeting so the expectations are clear, the plan is clear. If you need to make any changes to that plan, feel free to do it. The audit should be conducted to have minimal disruption to your day, and I'm sure I could hear a chorus of laughter coming from beyond there, but look, the auditor does want to make sure that this audit is conducted smoothly. So if there are any risks that are emerging that the auditor needs to know about for the day, please bring this to them at the opening meeting, and of course throughout the day you should be communicating with them. So some of those risks that you might be aware of might be, for example, staff availability. And also you might be wanting to bring into this conversation and planning that there might be some participants who have been selected to participate in the audit and have an interview that may be feeling a bit anxious about the audit. They may have identified that they want their support worker to attend that interview with them. So those are the kinds of things that you should be bringing in and working with the auditor to ensure that this whole audit is run smoothly, and they will be taking your guidance. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, the first, one of the key process areas that the auditor will cover is the NDIS Practice Standards Part 2 governance. And I know that many of you may consider this area somewhat of a weakness. I want to let you know you're not alone. You have no doubt had quite a journey yourselves in the last 12 months. and your attention has been focused on rapidly responding to the changes and the risks that COVID have presented. Your business may be in growth mode. So your attention has been really to ensuring that you are providing that quality service to your participants. So it's likely that some of these governance process and some of these systems may be sitting a little bit dormant, okay? Don't worry about it. We've identified it and we're going to have a corrective action in place to ensure that you are going to be ready for that audit. So the way I'm going to approach this is I'm going to talk a little bit around how the auditor is going to talk in this audit to key personnel. So they will ask things like, do you have roles defined and descriptions available for your key personnel? Who in your key personnel is responsible for what, based on what competency? This is quite often overlooked. We're really good at identifying roles and responsibilities for everybody else other than the director. So the auditor will be asking that. One thing that they will also be checking in with this area of governance is that there is an opportunity for people with lived experience of disability to participate in a meaningful way to your governance processes. Now, for a larger organisation, for larger providers that may have, for example, a board in place, that may be ensuring that there is effective and active participation and representation in the board. For small scale providers, this can be seem a bit more of a challenge. But what you can be doing is ensuring that you have fantastic feedback mechanisms in place that really listen to the voice of your participant and act on the feedback that they're giving you. That if, for example, it can be that they find that the information, the policy that you provided around complaints or privacy, that it was quite complicated and they couldn't engage with it, then that would be something that you could correct. You might get to and actually preparing something in an accessible format. So that truly is an example of how people with lived experience of disability can contribute to this governance process in the form, for example, of strengthening your own internal documented policies and procedures. So the key area that is covered under governance, and in fact is at the root of the whole approach of this scheme, is risk management. So I will be, as an auditor, I'd be talking to key personnel and saying, can you please explain to me what your risk management process is? So when do you all get together and identify the risks that are present or emerging for your business? Remember, governance is just at that slightly higher level, okay? You are busy in your business, but we want to ensure that you are a sustainable business. So you need to have your head up looking at what's going on in your sector. What do you need to be aware of to be effectively responsive and proactive to? So I will be talking to you about how that actually works within your business. Is there a business risk register where I can see the outcomes of that risk assessment? And I would like to see in that risk register, what are those controls that you have identified? And when do you come back and check that they are effective? And have you had to make any changes? So out of your risk assessment, you should be identifying and doing some business planning. Now, a business plan or a strategic plan is not mandatory, but business planning is. Again, we want to make sure that you are a sustainable business. So how do we do this unless we have some clear goals? We know where we want to head as a business with objectives that are measurable and targets that we can actually monitor with performance indicators. So I'd like to see the outcomes of that planning process. It could be in the form of just 3 or 4 meaningful objectives, measurable, remember, measurable objectives. I'd like to see where they're documented, and talk to me about how you actually review how you're tracking towards those objectives. The next thing I'd like to talk to you around is, okay, we know who's responsible for what, but let's talk around continuity planning and delegation. This was a little bit a theoretical element up until COVID. So we want to see that you have identified key process owners who have access to what information to enable that particular process and that system to operate. Now, if they took themselves away and went to Fiji, who is the delegated replacement, and what do they need to know, and what access do they need to have to ensure that process and that system continues to be implemented effectively? Okay, that's the purpose of delegation. Now you consider scenarios, right? So when that might come into effect, and again, try to ensure that you are going to be testing that. So identifying gaps in knowledge, for example, between one person and the next to ensure that they really can effectively step in and take on that role. Conflict of interest is also under governance. So the requirement is that you are able to identify and manage, effectively control, a potential and actual conflict of interest. Conflicts of interest occur all of the time. It is not that you can actually remove them, totally prevent them, but you must do what you can to effectively control them. Okay, so the auditor will ask, have you had any conflicts of interest? What kinds of conflicts of interest do you think would be likely within the kind of your business model or in your scope of services? So have a system that actually captures that and logs how you've actually controlled it. Big one here, you as key personnel who I'm talking to, the business owner potentially, or the person who has ultimate decision-making responsibility to ensure that your business is compliant. How do you know what your compliance requirements are? It's a big question, and it's a really big area to stay on top of. But you do need to ensure that you do have a process in place that has identified compliance requirements. There is a person responsible for monitoring the changes, and that your key personnel understand the impacts of that change on the way that you do things, and ultimately also in your systems. And the auditor may ask, in response to the updated NDIS practice standards in November, what kinds of things have you changed in your system? The questions aren't designed to be a trick question. It really, again, is about providing the auditor with assurance that you are engaged and that you have these systems available to support you to effectively keep on top of this area. Information management is a risk that we are all facing. And it certainly is a high risk in disability and aged care, in that you are custodians and responsible for storing an inordinate amount of personal information. So the good news for you, and we can talk about this in a little bit later, is that ShiftCare is one of your controls for effective information management, in that you have a platform where you can share documentation, provide control access to records, for example. So you are already going a long way to safeguard personal information. Excuse me for a second. All right, the next area is human resource management. Now, human resource management goes above and beyond just ensuring that your workers are meeting those compliance checks. We are in a values-based sector. The ethics must be aligned. So what kind of culture are you setting and ensuring that you are getting the right people into your service? How are you keeping track of that and identifying if there are any issues? All right, the next thing is financial management and governance. The auditor is not going to be looking at your financial processes in a lot of detail. They're not going to be going into your software Xero and looking at it in detail. But what they want to know is that you have processes and systems in place to effectively support this area. Internal audits are a requirement. The system requires your attention. So internal audits are designed to look at how they're serving you and making sure you are driving continuous improvement and correcting gaps. And incidents and complaints. Now, governance is important here, that your key personnel are aware of any any incidents and complaints that are occurring in service. So the auditor will say, can you please talk to me about what you do? Is it available in your management review meetings? Are you documenting it? That is what they're going to ask. How many complaints have you received? How many incidents have you had to handle? Do you have assurance that you've handled them effectively and in accordance with compliance requirements? So in this area, the auditor might be looking at, again, your management meeting minutes and also your continual improvement or action register. All right, and the last thing here, we touched on it earlier, is the continuity planning and effective emergency preparedness. Now, it's one thing to identify and have these emergency plans, but you do need to test them. So ensure that in your internal audit program that you have mapped in a test emergency preparedness. Sorry, can you get my battery, please? Thanks. All right. Now, the second process area, which is a large process area, of course, is human resource management. Please identify the person, the key process owner of this area, and ensure that they are well equipped to be able to walk the auditor through your supporting systems. This is a massive area. By design, system design, it is quite an easy thing for the auditor to identify if there are gaps. So in your audit planning, please dedicate enough resources and timing to ensure that this actually is up to date. It is a shame to have a system, a non-conformance raised in a system just simply because it hasn't been implemented fully and updated. So human resources, as we said, it touches on it touches on more than just meeting your compliance requirements, the compliance checks. It actually ensures that you have people who are meeting your ethics and your values. All right, to see the control of your human resources, the auditor may ask for something like your organisational chart. There is a requirement for you to identify the NDIS workers in your organisational chart. Those NDIS workers are those roles that have been risk assessed by you. That needs to be documented. We need to see that in your system because those NDIS workers are subjected to the mandatory NDIS worker checks. Now, I would also be asking as an auditor, can I please see evidence that you have identified the required competency, the skill sets that are required for each of these roles? I might be asking to see your position descriptions, and for a larger provider, we might see something like a skill and competency matrix. So please spend time again and ensuring that you do have a good clarity around your structure, around those roles that are considered to be NDIS workers, and that your system is updated to effectively support you to keep on top of compliance checks and also support you to identify training requirements. So training requirements include mandatory training, including, for example, the safe use of PPE, the orientation module provided by the NDIS, but also your induction. So please do what you can to provide an effective induction program and log when that was provided, because your induction program should change over time as your compliance requirements change and the way you do things change. So ShiftCare offers a wonderful compliance area, which can be your source of truth to control all of your human resource compliance requirements. So again, please spend some time in ensuring that you are in that area and updating. The other requirement here in regards to human resources is ensuring that for any worker that has had an allegation made against them or has been involved in a reportable incident or notifiable incident, that record of that is retained. And some providers actually do have a separate register that is available to them and access control to, again, safeguard personal information of your worker. Now, in the area of service provision, under the core module, this is your strong point. This is where ShiftCare really comes into its own and really provides you effective oversight over and control over operations. The auditor is going to go through a number of things. They're going to ask about what kind of information do you have available to support people to effectively make the choice that you're the right provider for them. When do you implement consent? Please, please implement it as early as possible. We start on a journey with the participant very early and start collecting information and we haven't got consent. So move it as far forward as you can. What is your, they'd like to see the consent form. If there is anything that supports the intake, it could be an interview checklist, for example. But after the person has decided that they are happy to come on board and you have developed in collaboration with them the service agreement, and that is a requirement that you actually inform the participant about certain things and that you do have that agreement that you are going to provide services. So a service agreement as a document is not a mandatory requirement. Someone can say, I don't want to sign it and don't give it to me, I don't care. But you must at least still go through the service agreement process. And if they don't want it and they don't want to sign it, document it and some of the reason as to why. Now, with the updated standards, there is also now an additional requirement in this intake process to effectively identify and control emergencies. So you do need to develop an individualized emergency plan, and it makes sense to have that attached to that service agreement and shared with the participant. Again, bringing everybody on the same page here. Now, the auditor will also look at your support, your strengths and needs assessment and your risk assessment. This needs to be comprehensive, proportionate to the services you're providing and the kinds of risks that might be present and complexities that might be present for your participants. Please spend some time in this risk assessment. It is a live document. It's one thing to identify the risks. You do need to identify what you can do about it in the form of a risk control, and you are required to come back and evaluate how effective that risk control was. And if it wasn't, make some changes. If the auditor sees support plans that have been not touched for over 12 months, that would be raising a flag, because things change for people all of the time. So look at your risk assessment and ensure that it is current. Out of that risk assessment, you should be identifying risks, including, for example, around mealtime management. You will also need to be ensuring that there is the identification of those implementing forms in the home, for example, medication forms, etc. So please ensure, again, I can't say it strongly enough, it is a focus area. Ensure that that risk assessment is really working for you. What gets produced out of that is a support plan. This is a document. It should not be embedded in your progress notes. A support plan gives the support worker and the team an understanding of who that participant is, what they like, the way they like to communicate, what the higher risk areas are that the support worker needs to know before they step foot potentially in the home. So that support plan really needs to be a working practical document to support your support workers to deliver the highest quality services and put those safeguards in place. It's not okay for a support plan to be communicated and embedded within progress notes. Progress notes, ShiftCare is a powerhouse for this. I'd encourage you to look at all of the functions available to you in this progress notes, because you can add headings. And these headings serve to structure your progress notes to support effective monitoring. So whoever is reviewing those progress notes can quickly identify if there are any changes. And also ensuring that your workers are aware that if there is a complaint, if there is an incident, it can be logged directly in your progress notes at the time of the service. And I can tell you, in terms of providing a story that supports an investigation, that is very powerful. You don't need to document all of the details, but at least in terms of an audit trail, document it right away that it has occurred. So that is the area of service provision. And again, you are very well supported with ShiftCare, but there will be those forms that sit outside and templates that sit outside of this platform that the auditor will look at. Let's just take a quick moment to talk about the participant interviews. So participant interviews are one of the most powerful things the auditor can do in an audit. It is about hearing directly from your participants how they are experiencing your service. You are responsible to support the coordination of these interviews. So I would encourage you to, highlight that this is an informal process designed to get their feedback about your service. It is not a financial audit. The auditor is not going to look at any aspect of that participant's plan, for example, financial aspects of their plan. So participants can opt out, but you do need to document that. All right. Participant interviews and their feedback is also de-identified. Okay. Now, the outcomes of the audit presented in an audit report. Let's go to worst case scenario, that red that everybody's frightened of, the major non-conformance. So if the auditor finds in this audit that you have a gap in your process and in your system, that is meaning that you are not meeting your compliance requirements and poses a risk, they will raise a major non-conformance. But don't worry, it's not the end. You are provided with an opportunity to give a corrective action plan. Those corrective actions need to be implemented within 90 days, and a follow-up audit will be conducted to verify that. So that will be at an additional expense to you. Now, the other area of non-conformance would be a category minor non-conformance. A minor non-conformance is quite common, so please don't think that this is a failing. Again, this is an opportunity to identify what needs to be corrected. So very common for mature businesses who have been implementing systems for a while and gaps to naturally occur. So minor non-conformances can be addressed with a corrective action plan, and those corrective actions will be verified at the next audit. One note is, if there are a collection of minor non-conformances, potentially 3, in the one area, the auditor may have concerns and think there might be a systemic gap, a major non-conformance can be raised. So just bringing that to your attention. So key here is there's nothing that's going to be an outcome here, and even if there's a major non-conformance, that's going to prevent you from maintaining your registration or achieving your certification. Okay, all right, so now how are we going to get to do this? The approach I want you to take is an internal audit. So focus in on one of those process areas, aligned to the modules of the practice standard. Look at governance, look at service provision, look at human resources. Review your procedures, get into them again. I know it's probably been a while, but this is the time to do it. What do you say you're doing? Check end to end. Are you doing it? What systems have been referenced? So your risk management procedure makes reference to a risk register. Pull it up. Is it working for you? Is it implemented? Collect valuable insights and gaps and develop your own corrective action plan. Engage your team and prioritize. What do we need to take action on before the audit, or what is more of a system correction that's going to be needing to take a little bit more time? Systems aren't perfect. The audit isn't looking for perfection. They are looking to show, for verification that they are supporting you, and that if they're not, you're onto it, and that you are committed to improving them. All right. This is something that can be set up to support your internal audit. You can do this as a team, and it really does remove this complexity. It's called a service blueprint, and we love them. So when you're traveling through a journey with your participant end to end, they move through certain phases: discovery, when they're learning about you, when they come on board, you set them up for service delivery, you monitor how things are going, and you respond to change and complaints and incidents. You review the progress towards outcomes, and you act, and you support them through potentially their NDIS plan review, and finally through to exit. Underneath these phases, identify what it is that you are doing, the tasks that you are doing, and then identify the areas in your system: ShiftCare, consent form, service agreement, strengths and needs assessment, risk assessment. What are you implementing in your system at each one of these steps? And then select your participant, look at their record, and provide yourself assurance that you can see evidence of these systems being implemented for your participant. That removes complexity. That's a full, comprehensive process approach to an internal audit that will help you to identify what needs to be actioned. Now, we do have an internal audit and audit preparation tool that we have prepared, and is going to be available to all of you who are attending, to get you move through in a systematic way, to really give you that assurance you are where you need to be and have that confidence for that external audit. Of course, there's also, you can feel free to contact us directly if you do need some additional support. We really are excited to be working with you, and we'd love to be able to help you through this journey. So thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for understanding as I work through working from home technical arrangements. You think I'd have it down pat by now, but no. So thank you very much. I look forward to responding to your Q&A.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This is great. You really handled the whole battery thing very, very well. I don't think I would have managed. Thank you so much.
I know, thank you. Sending text messages to respective children. Thank you.
I love it. I've had to do this in the past. It's like, please send me my time. Yes.
I should have my own webinar checklist, really.
Part of the process. Thank you so much, Amanda. This was brilliant. I learned a lot. So just because we had the question quite a few times, yes, the recording will be sent for sure. Just be patient whilst we upload it to the cloud and share everything with you. We will also be able to share in a few days, in a few weeks, the audit tool that Amanda mentioned toward the end. So don't worry about that too. We have your email, so as long as you registered with an email that you have access to, you will get all those recordings. Otherwise, just let us know in the messages. We've got 5 questions that haven't been answered by Andrew because they're probably outside of his realm of expertise. So we thought that we will give them over to you, Amanda, to
Great.
answer. I'm going to start from the top because otherwise that's a bit cheating for people that have been waiting very patiently. So we've got the first question, which is, if I add classes that are under core module, will the audit be more expensive?
No.
Good. Okay, short and sweet. How much experience do they expect the support worker to have in terms of years?
Oh gosh, okay, that's a really good question. So this is dependent on the participant's needs. So it is not a blanket competency statement. So if your support worker is supporting somebody who has more complex needs, then the degree of experience must be aligned, right? If you have a support worker who is providing daily tasks, for example, or maybe community access, taking people out in the community, and they don't have a high risk profile, for example, they don't have complexities, then the degree of experience might be something along the lines of maybe 2 years. It really is up to you to determine. But again, it is aligned directly to the participant needs.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Next question is, do position descriptions require a write-up or just the resume?
Okay, so the position descriptions really are an output of a process where you have identified the role, what competencies are required, what skills and what responsibilities that role is going to have. So I would say position descriptions are a much better output of that process. The CV is actually what your applicant provides you. So a position description certainly should be available even to support your applicant to better understand what is expected of that role.
Thank you. Next question is, the mealtime plan, can registered nurse complete this, or does it need to be an OT or dietitian or speech therapist? If we have assessments/report by Allied Health, can a registered nurse write the mealtime plan?
Okay, that's a really good question. Again, this is going to be aligned to the degree of risk and supports needed for mealtime management from the participant. So in general, the requirement is that a suitable health practitioner is responsible for developing that mealtime plan. So one would expect for somebody that poses a higher risk for mealtime management, you would be wanting to get an occupational therapist, for example, to at least review that plan and verify that it is effective. For people who actually have a lower risk for mealtime management, it would be applicable for a health practitioner, a registered nurse, to review those assessments and to be able to effectively develop that mealtime plan.
Brilliant. I've got a bit of an open question here. Hi, can I request more information about the individual emergency plan?
Yeah, okay, yes. So this is a new requirement under the updated standards as of last year in November. It is, of course, off the back that we are facing and we have to be responsive to an emergency scenario that is in our community, being the pandemic. So this became real, right? So the Commission identified that more needs to be done here. The requirement is that you are identifying the criticality of the supports that you are providing to the participant and the impact of those on that participant if those supports were having to be disrupted. So the disruption can be, of course, in if your provider workforce is no longer able to provide those supports. So then a contingency plan, a plan needs to be put in place. Who can that participant actually receive those critical supports from? In the event of an emergency, participants will have certain needs. It can be communication needs. There can also be people that are at higher risk because they might need some support for mobility. It is important that these things are clearly identified and discussed. Escalation pathways in regards to contacting the relevant people to support somebody in an emergency need to be identified as well. So it does sound like a lot of work, I know, but I suspect that it is going to be something that is going to be put in place and to a large extent available with the participants' knowledge coming into service providers. Once they've done one emergency plan, there will be a lot of similarities potentially. But the requirement is you identify the criticality of the services that you provide and the impact of disruption, and have a control plan in place in the event that those services are disrupted. Now, that needs to be attached and to the service agreement and provided to the participant.
Awesome. So this one is done. Are we able to complete the documents on ShiftCare? As we currently just upload them, we find that there is more workload with this method.
That's a ShiftCare question.
Yeah, well, complete the documents. Yeah, unfortunately, once you've uploaded the document into ShiftCare, it's there as a static document, so you can't actually go in and edit it, and then it doesn't automatically get resaved. So if you did need to complete documents that are already uploaded into ShiftCare, you would need to download those documents and then re-upload them into ShiftCare. At the moment, there's no way to edit the documents that are actually saved up into ShiftCare, but definitely we can take that up with the product team and see if that's something we can do in a future release.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, this one is about transport. If someone requires transport support, can we allocate someone who has no qualification but has good driving skills?
So again, this comes back to the participants' needs. So identifying the competency required to effectively provide that transport service should incorporate things like, is manual handling going to be required? So there are some things you need to consider before you can make a statement of there is no competency needed. Always start that competency determination with the participant. So if their need is, their risk is low, and that it is simply a very straightforward transport service, then yes, it is okay to employ and allocate a support worker that doesn't necessarily have direct experience in the sector. That is up to you as a provider to identify, to determine. That's not set. So I'd always start with the participants' needs.
Let's remember that. Thank you. Next one, do we need medication forms if we do not administer medication?
So I would say no. So that wouldn't be needed.
Awesome.
Just with that, again, in your audit planning, obviously feel free to get some clarity and ensure that you haven't indicated that you are supporting people with medication in your original application. Okay, so just ensure that that has been that is clear, and it might be that you choose to remove that outcome.
So this one is about timing on when to start this whole process that we just discussed today. So the question is, if we are an organization that just started, not yet with participants, and need to get going already with the registration, is that okay? Or do we need to practice for a while, then register? What do you recommend as the ideal time of going through the process?
Okay. Yeah, okay, so that is quite a complex one. I'll attempt to answer and give a brief answer, and then if you want some more detailed explanation, please feel free to contact me. All right, so there are certain kinds of audits that are undertaken. If you are a provider that has not started delivering services, you will be undertaking a provisional audit. What that means is that the auditor can't verify that you're implementing systems. You don't have signed service agreements. You haven't implemented support plans, okay? So you undertake a provisional audit. It's really focused on a documentation review. If you choose to go through that pathway, you will be required to undertake an audit, and this is something that is coming from the Commission. You could be asked to undertake an audit 3 months after you start to commence delivering services. All right, so where in the first instance you're thinking, phew, light on, that's great, it's a light audit, be aware that you will be asked to undertake an audit to verify implementation of those systems. All right. If you decide to go now and to start to deliver services, obviously ensuring that you are only providing supports to participants that is self-managed or plan managed, that you can then go through a full certification audit, which is conducted in 2 stages. It is a good way to go and have that out of the way, and ensuring that you've got that great foundation for you moving forward. So it is, of course, going to be at an additional expense in that first year potentially. So there are some things to consider there. But so generally, if I was to answer, if I was setting off down this pathway, I think that I would be laying the foundation. If I was ready and wanting to participate in this space and I had participants who need my services, I'd be more inclined to start to delivering services and going through the full certification audit. But everybody's position is very different. So
Thank you. That's a great answer, Amanda. So next one. Do we have, I feel like you've answered this one before. Do we have to have the mealtime management plan or policy in place, even if we do not provide the support in the business? Thanks.
Okay, that's a really great question. Okay, now, if you, first of all, you need to identify the risk and determine very clearly that you will not be providing that kind of service, that support and mealtime management. So if you can confidently say that there would never be a scenario where you will need to do that, identify that within your risk register, okay, within your risk management process. It is the auditor then can audit and identify that as not applicable. All right, but I would suggest that that is a rarity. Now, I'm just going to talk to the inclusion of mealtime management, even if it is a little bit outside of your scope. You do need to identify the risk associated with mealtime management for your participants, regardless. So it is important that you do have that identified within your risk assessment process for the person. So, and you are responsible, as we all are, in playing a role in actually identifying and effectively responding to those risks. It could be likely, for example, that there is a risk that you identify and this person has not been connected to their allied health therapist to be able to develop that mealtime management. Now, we all have a role to play to ensure that those connections are made and that risk is effectively controlled. So the process for risk identification and need for mealtime management needs to be evident in your systems. If you are not going to be supporting somebody ever with mealtime management, then it is okay for you not to have a policy for that. But I would suggest, because you are identifying the risk, it would be worthwhile having a procedure in place that supports whoever's taking that doing that intake and risk assessment, knows what they're looking for, understands how to identify that risk, where to log it, and what kind of controls could be put in place. I hope that answers your question.
So we've got 17 remaining questions and 4 minutes to go. No pressure, Amanda. So any questions that is left unanswered, don't worry, we will be answering them as quickly as possible on an article posted on our website, and we will let everyone know, even if you get posted. Yes, Andrew?
Sorry, Agnes had a question. She wasn't able to use the Q&A button. So Agnes, just to let you know, we will add your question into the Q&A as well. So don't be concerned. We'll get to you as well. Thanks, Cecile.
No worries. Okay, the next question. So it's about COVID. We love talking about COVID. COVID management. Is there anything in particular they are looking at? Question about processes, COVID safety plans, COVID tracing, etc.
Oh gosh, okay, yeah, COVID is going to be present across multiple processes and systems. So in your risk management process, number one, it would be expected that it has been identified as a risk and that you have evaluated that risk and you have a risk treatment plan. COVID is a risk to your business operating. there's COVID risk to your workers, and of course, there's COVID risk to your participants. So identify those risks and identify what you have going to be implementing effectively to control those risks across those areas. Then they would be expecting to see, so that's in your governance area, that you have developed in your continuity plan provisions for where your key personnel have been affected by COVID and your business has been affected by COVID. Remember, emergency planning, preparedness, and testing. Then, of course, in your human resources, of course, we need to see COVID present. So there is, of course, induction on safe infection control procedures, that all of your workers have done the mandatory training. So these kinds of requirements would be in your human resource process. And service provision, I would be expecting also to see for your participant risk that the risk profile of the participant has been effectively identified, and that there are those safety controls put in place in the service environment to effectively mitigate infection. And of course, that again, all of your workers are inducted and have a good understanding of how to safely use things like PPE. You would be responsible for providing that PPE, for example. So to answer your question, COVID should be present in every process area, from governance to human resources, service provision.
Awesome. I feel like it's a question that I could also answer, but probably you're better than me. So, do you also have marketing program that we can use that we can use to obtain clients?
I don't know if I understand that question. Would you mind just repeating it?
Do you also have probably like a marketing program that we can use to obtain clients?
Oh, so Audit Hub does not provide a marketing plan. It would be worthwhile. I know there's other support that is needed.
Well, you know what? I'm going to actually share with that person 2 blog posts that I personally wrote about how to get more NDIS clients. So the first one is get a good website. And anyway, you can read through that list. I've got 2 blog posts that I've written that you can see in the answered list. Okay, and now Agnes, I'm just following the list. Agnes' question, it's probably going to be the last one. I have passed stage 1 audit and now I'm going to go through the stage 2. I do not know what they are after.
Okay, so we did run through what that audit will look like on the day. So there's going to be a combination of talking to your key personnel and getting that assurance that you know what the requirements are. I did in this presentation, feel free to go back and identify and look at some of those supporting systems and evidence that the auditor may be looking for. You'll be able to identify what you have in your system that aligns to that requirement. And then, of course, we do have that internal audit and the audit preparation checklist that will be available to you to ensure that you can go through in a systematic way, making sure that all of your records and your documentation is controlled and you do have that confidence by the time of the audit.
Thank you. So next one, probably the last one. Is that okay, Amanda?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, I am wondering, how do we know we are charging the right payment? Do the auditor will ask to pull out the items that the service have been charged and the evidence of it?
Very good question. Okay, so yes, the answer is an auditor will want to verify that you are charging correctly. They will ask to see, for example, a sample invoice. So my advice to you would be to go to the support catalogue that is on the NDIS Commission website. It is downloadable in a CSV file. Identify those registration groups that you are providing services under, and of course ensuring that you have that alignment to what has been identified in the participants plan. The support catalogue really is a powerful tool, and making sure, so just do a check on those invoices to satisfy yourself that you are effectively charging under the right area of the support catalogue.
Woo! That is so much content, Amanda, that we've covered today. Thank you so much. We're gonna have to wrap up. I know there are 17 questions that we haven't answered. I'm so sorry. So we were so amazed by how many people registered for this webinar, probably because we know that auditing is a bit of a key thing when it comes to the NDIS industry. So thank you so much, Amanda, for being the first one to join our expert series. If you have any other requests for webinars, please do shoot us an email because we will be able to put some more together. And I think I noticed some people that were interested in the marketing webinar. So I don't know, maybe I'll be joining the next one. Who knows? Andrew, if you want to do a webinar, we can as well. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amanda. We will be copying all of the questions that we've received
Great.
to answer them as best as we can, but we are running out of time and you guys have been the best at asking so many amazing questions. So thank you everyone as well for joining, and we will send the recording, don't worry, before the end of the week.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity.